Hey church family, this is Pastor SooSang, and in this video I want to revisit and do a reprisal of the presentation I gave at our December congregational meeting in which the major differences and similarities of the PCA and the CRC were compared next to each other. There has been a handout that I gave and it looks something like this. It's been sitting at church. It's there for you to take a look at anytime you want. I'll also email this out again. But this PowerPoint has all the same content. And what we're going to do is I'm going to redo that presentation in this video. And we're going to do it over two videos. This first video, we will look at the similarities between the CRC and PCA, and then we will look at also the differences. And then in the second video, then we will look at pros and cons. The pros of the PCA versus the cons, and then also the pros of the CRC versus the cons. That's what will happen in the second video. So let's start. So first, the similarities. First, as you can see right here, they're both what we might say evangelical or orthodox in their theology, and they're both in the Reformed, or sometimes called the Calvinist, out of the Calvinist approach toward the Bible. That is that they both come out of the Reformation. They both take the Bible, have a very high view of the Bible, and neither of them are theologically heterodox, or some people call theologically liberal, although there's some differences there that we will talk about later, but that's first in their theology. Second, in their governing structure right here, they're both Presbyterian in the way they are governed. That sounds kind of strange because one is called the Presbyterian Church, but and the other one's called the CRC. But by Presbyterian, what we mean is that they're led by elders. So if both churches believe that Jesus is head over the church, who reigns with word and spirit. But then who are the human leaders? They are the elders, or called the elders and pastors, because pastors are a kind of elder who specialize in word and sacrament ministry. So their governing structure is similar. They both have a national presence across the country, with roots that go deep into American history. I'll get into that a little bit when we get to when they started. They both have international impact in history. They've sent out missionaries to many different countries and started seminaries and so forth, and written theology books, so forth. And they've had large impact, both of them. And then this last one is they both have three levels of assembly. And so, the local church, as you would know, there's a local church. And then there's a level of assembly or governance above the local church, and that's called presbytery in the PCA and classis in the CRC, but they're very similar. It's more like a difference of name than it is an actual structure. Those are the gatherings of the elders above the local church level. And then this other one over here is when the whole church gathers together, typically once a year. And so all the pastors and elders will tend to gather together once a year. In the PCA, they call it General Assembly, and in the CRC, they call it Synod. And then there they celebrate certain things. They have certain reports. They deal with certain serious issues. They might have to consider new denominational laws and those things. But again, similar. They both have three levels of assembly. So those are the major similarities. Let's go to differences. Here on this side, I have the PCA, and here on the side of the CRC, and then I'm putting comparisons on similar matters, as you can see. The PCA has its roots that are more English in origin, and the CRC are more Dutch, right? The CRC goes back to 1857, and the PCA looks like it's very young, 1973. Officially, as a legal denomination, they're fairly young. But their historical roots go back even further than that. They go way back into like the 19th and 18th century, when there were other different organizations and reorganizations of the Presbyterian Church. Both traditions, the CRC and the PCA, coming out of the Reformed tradition, have tended to fight and split and so forth. But in its current form, it started in 1973. This is where the headquarters are. The CRC is headquartered in Grand Rapids. The PCA is headquartered in Greater Atlanta. I think the headquarters is called Lawrenceville. And about size, the PCA is larger. They have about, they have about 1,500 congregations versus almost 1,100. These numbers go back to about 2016 and 2015. And so they're probably fairly close to accurate. And again, the PCA is large in terms of sheer numbers of members, about 374,000 versus 235, almost 36,000. So let's go to other differences. Here, let's talk about where do their leaders tend to go study in seminaries. The PCA draws from a much wider range of schools. The CRC is much more centralized, and this actually poses an issue for a lot of pastors. They do have pastors who go to other seminaries, but they ultimately usually have to do another semester or more study at Calvin Theological Seminary before their credentials are recognized and then go to ordination. But the PCA does not do that. The PCA has covenant, multiple different campuses, 9 different campuses of Reformed Theological Seminary, sometimes called RTS. These aren't officially PCA seminaries, but they're filled with PCA students, and the PCA very much recognizes the 2 Westminster schools. And the PCA also has a campus ministry of which one of them, John and Eunice Kim, we support the University of Hawaii Campus Ministry, Reformed University Fellowship. So this is where a lot of their leaders tend to draw this. That's a significant difference. In terms of their racial and ethnic makeup, the CRC is far more Caucasian, and especially Dutch. So if you look at them racially, they may just look white, but actually a very large percentage of them are ethno-specific, having Dutch, being Dutch in culture. And the PCA, has a higher percentage of non-white members, especially Asians. And so let's particularly talk about Koreans. We talked about the level of organization above the local church. The CRC has 2 Korean-speaking classes, but in the PCA side, they have 9 different presbyteries out of 250. These are Korean-speaking congregations. We're not even talking about second-generation Asian or Korean pastors. They make up 15% of the denominations. That is a very significant percentage of the denomination. And right here, where are they strong? Where do you find these churches in each of the denominations? The CRC tends to be mostly strong in the Midwest and more in rural areas. And the PCA tends to be more strong in the South and in the East Coast. And they don't have as many churches on the West Coast, but they are definitely spreading and growing. And they're very strong among Koreans and Korean Americans. So that's just this last point. I want to make a little something up. It's important to know where the churches are, because where the denominations tend to be stronger is where they tend to focus on how they think about their mission and how they think about their members and how their members think about cultures. This is a far more rural set of folks, where the PCA explicitly has a very urban-centered kind of, that's where their churches are, and that's where they're trying to plant churches. The CRC also is trying to plant churches in the city, but they just don't have nearly as many churches there, so they're quite far behind. So that's, for the time being, let's stop there, and we'll get to part 2 when we do the pros and cons.